Now for dispatching actions, I first of all want to have two new buttons here which allow me to dispatch actions for incrementing and decrementing. So here I'll add a new div, and in that div I'll just add two buttons. The first one says increment, the second one says decrement, so that we have these buttons. And now to add some spacing, I'll quickly dive into counter module CSS and add this selector .counter button, which selects these buttons here. And I'll just give them a margin of 1 rem in all directions, just so that we have some spacing. Now, with that added, with that set up, now we want to wire up those two buttons, increment and decrement, so that they do increase or decrease the counter by 1. Now we know that we need to dispatch an action for that, but how does that work from inside a React component? Well, there is another hook which we can use, the useDispatch hook. When we call useDispatch here, we don't pass any argument to it, but instead this gives us back a dispatch function which we can execute. So dispatch here is a function which we can call, which will dispatch an action against our Redux store. So therefore now I'll add two new functions here in this counter component, the increment handler and the decrement handler. So two new functions which will wire up to the buttons. And in the increment handler, we want to use this dispatch function and execute it to dispatch a new action, and then do what we learned. An action is an object with a type property. So let's add such an object here as an argument to the dispatch function call, so that we dispatch this specific object. And then the value for type should be one of the identifiers we use in our Redux store reducer. So here in the reducer function, we handle the action type increment and the action type decrement. So we should dispatch one of these two identifiers. Of course, exactly these identifiers without any typos or changes. So back in counter, here I'll dispatch increment. And then here in the decrement handler, I'll dispatch an object with a type property with a value of decrement. Now we need to wire up those two functions to the buttons. So on this first button, we add a onClick prop and point at the increment handler. And on the second button, we do the same for the decrement handler. And if we do that and save this, if we now click increment, you see the counter increases. And if we click decrement, it decreases. So now we're able to use what we learned about Redux in this React demo, in this React component here.